Welcome back to Mental Mike's Recovery Radio, where recovery meets discovery. I am Mental Mike, and this is episode 18. You have put in real work to get here. Honest, uncomfortable, courageous work. This week, I want to talk about something that sits at the very center of what makes recovery last. Not a technique, not a breathwork practice, not a framework. Your relationships. One of the things I have seen over and over in my work with people in recovery is that the internal transformation can be real. The tools can be solid, the intention can be genuine, and still, if the relational environment around a person does not shift to support that growth, the ground beneath them stays unstable. The Unified Flux Model is clear on this. Addiction did not just affect you, it systematically reorganized the people around you, too. The trust that was broken, the roles that formed to survive the chaos, the walls that went up, none of that disappears just because the using stopped. So this week we do something important. We take an honest look at the foundation, not to pile on shame, but to get clear. We look at what healthy connection actually looks like, what the warning signs of relationships that can quietly undermine recovery feel like, and how to set boundaries not as walls, but as gates that you control. And I want to say something directly to anyone who has people in their life who are still skeptical, still watching and waiting. That skepticism is not personal. It makes complete sense. Your job right now is not to convince anyone with words. It is to show them with actions, one small honest choice at a time. That is how trust gets rebuilt. Slowly, quietly, one brick at a time. And today, I am honored to introduce you to Renee. Renee's story speaks directly to the heart of what Week 18 is asking you to face. Because Renee knows what it means to come out of the depths of addiction and look around at the relationships in her life and have to decide, honestly, which ones could hold the weight of who she was becoming. Her journey through rebuilding trust, through learning what real boundaries feel like, through finding the few genuine connections that could truly support her new life, maps directly onto the work I have built into Week 18 of the UFM. Renee did not need 100 people in her corner. She needed the right ones. And her story just might help you find yours. So settle in. Open your heart to this one, and let's go deeper together.
This week, we're getting into something absolutely critical for your new life, your relationships. Let's talk about how to make them strong, healthy, and a true support system. So let's just start with a really direct question right off the bat. Take a second and really think about this. I want you to be honest with yourself as we start this discussion. The people in your life, are they lifting you up or are they pulling you down, creating stress that puts everything you've worked for at risk? You know, before you can build something new and strong, you've got to take a good, hard look at the foundation you're starting with. Now, the point here is not to get stuck in the past or to pile on shame. Not at all. The goal is just clarity. We need to understand the damage that's been done so we can figure out how to repair it the right way.
One of the key ideas from our guide, from what we call Mental Mike, is that the damage done to our relationships wasn't just some random chaos. No, it was a systematic process. The disease of addiction has a predictable way of taking apart the trust and connection that are, well, the bedrock of any good relationship. And understanding that pattern, that's our first step to putting it all back together.
I'm willing to bet this progression looks painfully familiar. It starts with dishonesty, right? The little lies, the big lies. About using, about money, about where you were. That leads right into being unreliable. You know, the broken promises, the missed birthdays. And eventually, as things get worse, real, actual harm starts to pile up. I want you to hear this. This isn't just your story. It's the common, painful path of this disease.
Now, another great tool from our study guide, the Unified Flux Model, or the UFM, shows us how addiction never just affects one person. It completely reorganizes the family system. People start playing these survival roles. Maybe you see yourself in one of these, or your mom or your brother. The really crucial thing to get is that these roles don't just disappear when the drinking or using stops. The entire family has to learn a whole new way of being with each other.
Okay, so we've looked at the damage, we've surveyed the foundation, now for the good part. Let's look at the blueprint for what we actually want to build. Because you can't create healthy, supportive relationships if you don't even have a clear picture of what one looks like in the first place. This is the goal. These 6 things you see right here, these are the pillars of the strong connections we are aiming for. It's not about being perfect. Nobody is. But it's about building relationships where you feel seen, you feel safe, and you feel genuinely encouraged to grow into the person you're meant to be. And of course, on the flip side, the Unified Flux Model gives us these really clear red flags. I want you to think of these as giant warning signs. These are the dynamics in a relationship that can actively and sometimes quietly sabotage your recovery. Learning how to spot these is an absolutely critical skill for protecting your new life. So this brings us to probably the single most important tool you have for building and protecting these new healthy relationships, and that tool is boundaries. I really want you to try and reframe how you think about this. Boundaries are not selfish. They are not mean. They are a powerful, profound act of self-respect, and honestly, you can't have a healthy life without them. Let's get really clear on what we're talking about. A boundary is simply a limit that you set to protect your own well-being. It tells other people where you end and they begin. It's about what you will and will not accept. See, they're not walls to keep everyone out. They're more like gates. Gates that you control so you can let the right people in safely. I know setting a boundary can feel really intimidating. So let's just break it down into 4 simple steps. First, you have to figure out what your limit actually is. What are you not okay with? Second, you have to say it clearly and directly. No hints. Third, you state what will happen if that boundary is crossed. And fourth, and this is the toughest one for most of us, you have to follow through every single time. Breaking it down like this makes a scary idea feel way more achievable. Now look, this work is not easy. You're going to feel things. Feeling guilty? That's normal. Having people push back and get angry? Totally normal. Being afraid they'll leave? That's normal too. Knowing these challenges are coming helps you prepare for them. And listen, feeling these things doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're finally doing something different. All right, let's get into our final section. This is all about the active work. This is the construction phase. This is where we take all these ideas and start the real, hands-on process of repairing the relationships we can and making really wise choices about any new ones. This quote from Mental Mike is so important. If your loved ones are skeptical of you right now, it's not personal. It makes sense, right? It's their own way of protecting themselves after a long history of hurt. You just can't demand that they trust you. The key here is to realize your job isn't to convince them with your words, it's to show them with your actions, day in and day out. And this is exactly how you do it. This isn't about some grand, dramatic gesture. It's about the small, boring, daily stuff. Being honest, especially when it's hard. Doing what you say you're going to do. Taking accountability without making excuses. Showing up to your meetings. Every single one of these actions is like laying one more brick in that new foundation of trust. Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room, shall we? This is probably one of the most common questions we get, and honestly, one of the most resisted pieces of advice in all of early recovery. So what's the big deal? Why is everyone so against starting a new romance right now? The UFM recommends holding off on this, and it's not a punishment, I promise. It's a protection. A new relationship takes a ton of energy that you desperately need for your own healing right now. It can so easily become a substitute addiction. Plus, the emotional roller coaster of a new romance is a massive relapse risk. You are still getting to know the sober you. Give that person some time before you try to bring someone else into the picture. As we start to wrap up our discussion for this week, I really want you to hold on to this idea. The goal here is not to have a perfect family or 100 friends. It's not about fixing every single broken relationship from your past. It's about quality, not quantity. The real goal is to build a few genuine, authentic connections with people who truly support the person you are becoming. So, I'm going to leave you with this question to think about this week. I mean, really think about it. Close your eyes and visualize it. What would it feel like to be surrounded by people who respect you, who have your back, and who are genuinely cheering for you to succeed? Because that is the future you are building,
one right choice at a time.
This podcast made me realize something painful. For years, I thought addiction only damaged me. I didn't fully understand how much it changed everybody around me, too. My kids, my sister, my friends. Everybody adapted to my chaos in some way, and honestly, that truth hurt worse than detox ever did. The podcast talked about addiction reorganizing the entire family system. That's exactly what happened in my family. My oldest daughter became the responsible one way too young. My youngest stopped trusting promises completely. My sister became the rescuer. And me? I became the emotional storm everybody had to prepare for constantly. Some days loving, some days unavailable, some days manipulative, some days gone completely. Listening to them explain the progression of relational damage, dishonesty, unreliability, emotional harm, I could literally track my addiction through every relationship I ever had. That part was hard to hear, but necessary. The boundary section hit me especially hard because growing up, boundaries were basically non existent in my family. Everybody was in everybody else's business emotionally. Lots of guilt, lots of control, lots of emotional chaos disguised as love. So when people started setting boundaries with me in recovery, I took it personally at first. I thought they were abandoning me. Now I understand something different. Healthy people protect their peace. That's not cruelty. That's maturity. And honestly, I'm learning how to do that myself now too. The podcast said, boundaries aren't walls, they're gates. That image stayed with me because for most of my life, my relationships were either completely closed off or completely unprotected. No balance, either isolation or emotional flooding. Recovery is teaching me something in the middle exists. I cried listening to the section about trust though, especially when they said loved ones have reasons to doubt us. That's true. I broke promises for years, missed birthdays, borrowed money and disappeared. Said, this time is different, more times than I can count. And now in recovery, sometimes I still want immediate forgiveness. But this podcast reminded me trust isn't rebuilt through speeches. It's rebuilt through consistency, quietly, repeatedly, over time. That's humbling, honestly. The hardest part for me was hearing that not every relationship can or should be repaired. I think addicts carry this fantasy that sobriety automatically restores everything. Sometimes people are too hurt. Sometimes the relationship itself was never healthy to begin with. That reality hurt to accept. But weirdly enough, it also freed me because now I'm focusing less on making everybody approve of me and more on becoming somebody emotionally safe to be around. That feels healthier. The relationship addiction part was uncomfortable too, especially when they described new romance becoming a substitute addiction. That was definitely me. I use relationships like emotional narcotics, attention, validation, intensity, anything to avoid sitting alone with myself, and every breakup felt like withdrawal. Now I understand why recovery programs warn people about dating early on. It's not punishment, it's because if you don't know who you are sober yet, you'll disappear into somebody else emotionally all over again. That realization changed how I approach relationships now. I'm learning to ask different questions. Do I feel emotionally safe around this person? Can I be honest around them? Do they support growth or chaos? I never used to think like that. Honestly, I used to think love meant emotional intensity. Now I think real love might actually feel calmer than that. Safer, steadier, more honest. And maybe recovery itself is partly about learning how to stop confusing emotional chaos with connection. That lesson alone might save my life.
If something in this conversation stood out to you, don't ignore that. That's usually where the work begins. Recovery isn't about trying harder. It's about understanding what's actually happening and learning how to respond differently over time. If you're ready to take the next step, you can find resources, guidance, and support at soulrecoveryhub.com. Take what you heard today, sit with it, and keep moving forward. Copyright 2026, Mental Mike, all rights reserved.